Ladies, let me start with something that may shock you. Every man you've ever met, every guy you've dated, every partner you've had carries a secret fantasy he will never say out loud. Not because it's too dirty, not because it's too outrageous, but because it's too vulnerable. And here's the truth: most women never get to discover it. They get distracted by what they think men want, instead of listening to what actually burns beneath the surface. See, when you hear the phrase, a man's fantasy, your mind might rush to images of wild sex, exotic scenarios, or some risky idea he found on the internet. And sure, men can enjoy all of that. But the secret fantasy, the one that lives in the deepest part of his heart, is not about endless positions or role play. His secret fantasy is about intimacy, not just being naked with you, but being truly seen by you. That's the thing men don't tell you. What he craves more than anything is not just physical release, but emotional connection through intimacy. He wants to feel desired in a way that tells him he's not just a body, not just a provider, not just someone to check a box, but a man who awakens a fire in you. That is every man's hidden dream. So in this speech, I'm going to share with you the 5 key truths about intimacy that unlock every man's secret fantasy. Because when you understand these 5 things, you will tap into a part of him that most women never reach. You'll stop guessing what he wants and start creating an intimacy that he never forgets. Let's dive into the first one. K-point 1 every man fantasizes about being truly desired, not just accepted. This is where so many women misunderstand men. A lot of women think men just want sex. That's all they fantasize about, but that's not it. Sex without desire feels empty. What men fantasize about is being wanted in a way that feels undeniable. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a man who has had a long day, who's tired, who's carrying the weight of the world. Most people see him as strong, reliable, even unshakable. But underneath that, he sometimes wonders, does she actually crave me? Does she think about me when I'm not around? Does she look at me and feel lucky that I'm hers? That's the fantasy. It's not about you tolerating him or giving him affection, because you should. It's about you lighting up when he walks into the room, about you touching him not because you're supposed to, but because you can't help yourself. Do you know how rare that is for men? Most men live their lives with the pressure of having to be the pursuer, the initiator. They're the one who asks for intimacy. And yes, many of them play that role well. But the secret fantasy, it's to feel pursued, to feel like the woman they love looks at them with a hunger that says, I can't get enough of you. Think about the times when you flipped that script. Maybe you surprised him with a kiss when he wasn't expecting it. Maybe you whispered something bold in his ear. Maybe you reached for him not out of duty, but because you were genuinely turned on by him. In those moments, you touched his fantasy. You showed him that he doesn't just fill a role in your life. He excites you. And let me tell you, when a man feels truly desired, everything changes. He becomes more affectionate, more open, more vulnerable, and ironically, more loyal. Why? Because you're giving him something rare. You're showing him that intimacy with you isn't an obligation, it's an adventure. So if you want to step into every man's secret fantasy, start here, make him feel wanted. Look at him the way you did when you first met. Reach for him sometimes before he reaches for you. Give him those moments where he realizes he's not just accepted, he's irresistible in your eyes. That's the first step into his secret fantasy world. So we've uncovered the first truth. Every man's fantasy isn't just sex, it's to be desired. Desired like he is the fire that lights you up, not just the man who fills a space in your life. But that's only the beginning, because desire is like the spark that ignites the flame. Yet for that flame to keep burning, there's something even deeper he craves. And this takes us straight into the second secret every man holds. Key point 20. Every man fantasizes about emotional safety in intimacy, the freedom to be vulnerable without judgment. You want to know one of the biggest lies men are told growing up? Be a man. That's the phrase that follows him through childhood, teenage years, and all the way into adulthood. Be strong. Don't cry. Don't show weakness. And what happens? He grows up learning to put on an armor. He learns to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders while keeping a straight face. But here's the hidden cost. Deep down, he longs for a space where he doesn't have to wear that armor. A space where he can take it off and be human, messy, scared, uncertain, even emotional. And that space, more than anywhere else, he wants to find in you. That is part of his secret fantasy. to be with a woman where he doesn't feel like he has to perform, where he doesn't feel like he has to live up to an image, to have a woman who doesn't roll her eyes when he shares a fear, but who leans in and says, "It's okay, I see you, I've got you." But here's the challenge: most men never admit this. Why? Because they're terrified that if they show you their vulnerability, you'll see them as weak, and that's the last thing a man wants. So he suppresses it, he hides it, he jokes instead of opening up. He gets angry instead of admitting he's afraid. He shuts down instead of telling you what's on his mind. And yet, beneath all of that, the fantasy remains, what if I could be fully myself with her? What if I could reveal the parts of me no one else gets to see, and she would still love me even more than before? Ladies, listen to me when I say this. When you give a man emotional safety, you don't just fulfill his fantasy, you unlock his loyalty. Because the moment he realizes, I can take off my mask with her, I can cry, I can admit my fears, I can share my failures, and she doesn't love me less, she loves me more, that's when you become irreplaceable to him. It's not about babying him. It's not about treating him like he's fragile. It's about showing him that he's not alone, that your intimacy is not just skin to skin, but heart to heart, that the bedroom isn't just a place for passion, but also for refuge. Here's something powerful. One of the most intimate acts you can ever do with a man has nothing to do with sex. It's lying next to him, holding him, and letting him be silent. Yeah. No expectations, no performance, no pressure, just presence. That silence, that stillness tells him, I accept you even when you have nothing to give me in this moment. And that is intoxicating to a man. You want to know why? Because everywhere else in his life, he has to perform. At work, he has to deliver. With friends, he has to keep up appearances. In public, he has to project confidence. But with you, his secret fantasy is that he can collapse into your arms and still feel like a man. Key point 3. Every man fantasizes about playful passion, the freedom to explore intimacy without fear of rejection. Let's shift gears. Because while emotional safety is about depth, his fantasy isn't only about being held, it's also about play. And this is where a lot of relationships lose their spark. Do you remember the beginning of your relationship when everything was fun, when you teased each other, when you tried new things without overthinking it? That playful energy was magnetic. And guess what, men? Don't stop fantasizing about that just because the relationship gets serious. In fact, they crave it even more. Here's the truth: most men are terrified of rejection in the bedroom. They won't tell you that because society tells you it's women who worry about rejection. But men, they feel it too. When a man suggests something new or tries to be adventurous and he's shut down, it cuts deep. It makes him feel embarrassed. It makes him retreat. And after enough rejection, he stops trying. But in his fantasy, he imagines a woman who not only accepts his passion, but matches it. A woman who laughs with him when something feels silly. A woman who says, let's try it, instead of, that's weird. A woman who treats intimacy like a playground, not a job. Think about it this way: the most unforgettable experiences in intimacy aren't the perfect ones, they're the fun ones. They're the times you both tried something new and ended up laughing halfway through. They're the moments where you weren't worried about how you looked or whether it was right, but instead you were just there together enjoying it. That's his fantasy. To have a woman who lets him be free to explore, free to try, free to play. Because when intimacy becomes playful, it also becomes limitless. Suddenly, there's no ceiling on the connection. You can flirt, tease, experiment, and laugh. And in that laughter, you actually create more passion than any technique ever could. And here's the beautiful part: when you give him that playful freedom, he gives it back. He starts to notice what excites you. He starts to ask what turns you on. He begins to prioritize your pleasure, not because he has to, but because the energy between you is no longer one-sided. It's a dance, a game, a shared adventure. That is why his fantasy isn't about perfection. It's about passion. Passion that's raw, unfiltered, sometimes messy, sometimes funny, but always alive. So ask yourself, when was the last time you brought play into your intimacy? When was the last time you teased him, surprised him, or broke the routine? Because if you want to live in his fantasy, don't just give him love, give him play. So far, we've uncovered 3 layers of his hidden fantasy: to be desired, not just accepted; to feel emotionally safe enough to be vulnerable; to experience playful passion without fear of rejection. But we're not done, because his fantasy goes even deeper. Next, we'll explore something most women don't realize until it's too late. We've already peeled back 3 layers of his hidden fantasy. desire, emotional safety, and playful passion. But if you thought that was all, you'd only be scratching the surface, because there's another part of his secret fantasy that sits at the very core of how he defines himself as a man. And it has less to do with what happens in the bedroom and more to do with how he feels in your eyes. Key point for what every man fantasizes about: admiration, to be seen as your hero, not just your partner. Now, I know the word hero can sound old-fashioned. You might think, come on, it's 2025, we don't live in medieval times. I don't need a knight in shining armor. And you're absolutely right, you don't need one. You are strong, capable, independent. But here's the thing, men still fantasize about being that for you. It's not about rescuing you or about you being helpless. It's about how he feels when he knows he can provide value to your life. That value might be emotional, practical, or even physical. But deep down, a man's fantasy is to be admired by the woman he loves, to feel like he makes your world better just by being in it. Think about how men operate in the early stages of dating. Why do they go out of their way to impress you? Why do they plan big dates, fix things for you, or show up with gestures that say, I've got this? It's not just because they're trying to win you. It's because admiration fuels their identity. When you look at him with pride and appreciation, he feels powerful. He feels worthy. He feels like your man. Now, here's where relationships sometimes go wrong over time. That admiration fades. You stop noticing the little things he does. You stop complimenting his efforts. You stop showing gratitude, not because you don't love him, but because comfort has set in. And for a man, that feels like rejection in slow motion. But when you admire him, when you genuinely tell him, I love how hard you work, or you make me feel so safe, or I'm so proud to be with you, that's when you breathe life back into his fantasy. Because you're not just saying you love him, you're showing him you see him. Here's the truth: men are often starved of admiration. They might get respect at work, but it's transactional. You might get attention from strangers, but it's shallow. What they secretly crave is admiration from the woman who matters most. And when you give him that, when you show him he's your hero in the ways that count, whether that's how he supports you, how he protects you, or how he excites you, you unlock something primal in him. That's when he starts stepping up even more. That's when he works harder, not out of obligation, but because your admiration fuels his fire. That's when he gives more, because he knows he's not giving into a void. He's giving to a woman who sees him. And that's why admiration isn't a bonus in his fantasy. It's the heartbeat of it. Because without admiration, desire fades. Without admiration, play becomes routine. Without admiration, even emotional safety feels incomplete. But with admiration, you create a loop. The more you admire him, the more he wants to give. The more he gives, the more you admire him. And suddenly you're in a relationship that feeds itself instead of drains itself. So don't underestimate the power of looking at your man and letting him know, not just once, but often, that he is your hero. Not because you need saving, but because you admire the man he chooses to be for you. Key point 50, every man fantasizes about lasting intimacy, to be desired, admired, and loved long after the newness fades. Now we reach the deepest part of his secret fantasy, and this is the one men rarely ever talk about because it feels too vulnerable. Every man deep down has a fear that after the honeymoon phase, after the excitement, after the newness wears off, you'll stop wanting him. That eventually you'll see him as ordinary, that the fire will die and he'll just become another guy you once loved. That's his nightmare. And his fantasy, that it never happens. That even after years together, you still look at him the way you did in the beginning. That you still flirt, still touch, still surprise each other, still crave him as much as you once did. Because for men, longevity is part of the dream. It's not just, does she want me now, but will she still want me in 5 years, 10 years, 20? That's why when you see an older couple holding hands or still kissing in the street, it's so powerful. Because it's proof that passion doesn't have to fade. And that's what every man secretly hopes for. But here's the truth: lasting intimacy doesn't just happen, it's built. And the fantasy isn't that it stays perfect forever. The fantasy is that you'll both keep choosing it. That you'll both put effort into keeping the fire alive. That you'll both resist the trap of complacency and instead commit to play, to passion, to growth. You want to know one of the sexiest things you can do for your man? Keep surprising him. Keep him guessing. Not in a manipulative way, but in a way that says, I'm still invested. I'm still here. I still choose you. It could be as small as a flirty text in the middle of his workday. It could be as big as planning a date night out of nowhere. It could be as intimate as trying something new together, or as simple as reaching for his hand when you're walking down the street. Those little acts tell him, you still matter, I still crave you. And that fulfills his fantasy in a way no single night of passion ever could. Because what he really wants isn't a spark that burns out, it's a fire that keeps burning even through storms. Let me tell you, this men may never say it, but what they long for isn't just to be your lover today, it's to be your lover always, to be the man you still reach for, still laugh with, still admire, still want. That's the ultimate fantasy, because any man can be desired in the beginning, but to be desired in the middle and at the end, that's the dream. So when we put it all together, what do we see? His secret fantasy isn't some wild, unreachable idea. It's actually very human, very vulnerable, very real. He wants to feel desired, not just accepted. He wants emotional safety, the freedom to be vulnerable without judgment. He wants playful passion, intimacy that's alive and fearless. He wants admiration, to be seen as your hero. And he wants lasting intimacy, love that endures long after the newness fades. That's every man's secret fantasy. And when you give him that, you don't just unlock his passion, you unlock his devotion. We've reached the heart of the truth. We've peeled back the layers, and now you can see clearly what every man's secret fantasy really is. And here's the most surprising part. It's not about the exotic, the outrageous, or the things you see in movies. It's about the deeply human desires that lie beneath the surface of every man you've ever met. Because when you strip away the bravado, the ego, the performance, men want something so much more real. They want to feel chosen. They want to feel safe. They want to feel admired. They want to feel played with. They want to feel wanted for a lifetime, not just a moment. So let's put the pieces together, because this is where the real magic happens. The fantasy isn't physical, it's emotional. Every man's body craves pleasure, yes, but his soul craves connection. His fantasy is to walk into a room and see your eyes light up, knowing you're not just tolerating him, you're thrilled by him. His fantasy is to collapse in your arms after the world has beaten him down and know he won't be judged. His fantasy is to laugh with you, play with you, try new things with you without shame or fear. His fantasy is to hear you say, I'm proud of you, and feel like your hero. And most of all, his fantasy is to wake up every day, years down the line, and know that you still crave him the way you did when you first met. When you give a man that, you're not just giving him intimacy, you're giving him freedom. Freedom to be himself, freedom to love you without fear, freedom to give you the best of himself because he knows you see it, appreciate it, and reciprocate it. And when a man feels that, he doesn't just stay, he thrives. He becomes a better partner, a better lover, a better man, because you've touched not just his body but his heart. Why so many women miss this? Now, let me be honest. Most women never get here, not because they don't care, but because they've been missiled. They've been told men are simple, that men only care about sex, that if you keep him fed and satisfied, he'll stick around. And while there's some truth to men loving simplicity, the truth is men are not that simple. When you reduce a man's fantasy to just physical gratification, you miss the part that makes him loyal. You miss the part that makes him choose you, not just for tonight, but for forever, because sex without intimacy is replaceable. But intimacy, real intimacy, is unforgettable. And here's where the courage comes in. Intimacy requires effort. It requires intentionality. It requires you to resist the temptation of comfort and complacency. And it requires you to give him the very thing you crave as well. Desire, safety, play, admiration, longevity. These aren't just his fantasies. Deep down, they're yours too. The loop of desire. Here's the beautiful irony. When you fulfill his fantasy, he fulfills yours. Because men are mirrors. When you desire him, he starts desiring you even more. When you make him feel safe, he begins to open up parts of himself you've never seen. When you play with him, he brings fun and passion back to you. When you admire him, he works harder to be a man worth admiring. And when you show him you still want him years later, he shows you that passion never has to die. That's the loop. That's the magic. That's how relationships go from ordinary to extraordinary. Practical ways to live his fantasy. Now, I don't just want this to be inspiring. I want this to be actionable. So let me give you some tangible ways to bring these fantasies to life. Show desire first. Every now and then, don't wait for him to make the move. Surprise him. Kiss him when he's not expecting it. Send a flirty message in the middle of his day. Look at him like he's the most attractive man in the room. Those moments stick. Hold space for his vulnerability. The next time he opens up, even in a small way, Lean in. Don't dismiss it. Don't laugh it off. Don't change the subject. Listen. Thank him for trusting you. That one act could change the way he sees intimacy forever. Keep intimacy playful. Break the script. Try something new. Laugh together when it doesn't go perfectly. The more you keep fun in the bedroom, the more he'll want to keep bringing passion to it. Admire out loud. Don't just think it, say it. Tell him when you're proud of him. Tell him when you're grateful. Tell him when you find him attractive. Your words of admiration fuel him more than you realize. Never stop surprising him. Plan dates. Switch up routines. Do something unexpected. Keep giving him the message that I'm still in this. I still choose you. That's how you make intimacy last decades, not months. Do those 5 things consistently and you won't just touch his fantasy. You'll become it. The challenge. But let me challenge you. This isn't about perfection. This isn't about doing everything right. This is about effort, consistent, intentional effort, because relationships don't die from one big fight or one bad moment. They die from neglect, from taking each other for granted, from stopping the very things that made you fall in love in the first place. And that's why knowing his secret fantasy matters. Because once you know it, you can stop guessing. You can stop wondering, what does he really want? And instead, you can give him the one thing no other woman may ever give him: intimacy that is physical, emotional, playful, admiring, and lasting. The payoff. And here's what happens when you do. You don't just get a man who stays. You get a man who adores you, a man who worships you, a man who looks at you years down the line and says, I'm still crazy about her. You become the woman who doesn't just satisfy him for a season, but the woman who fulfills his fantasy for a lifetime. And that, ladies, is the most powerful thing you could ever give him. So the next time you wonder what men really want, the next time you hear the phrase, every man's fantasy, remember, it's not what you think. It's not just sex.